How you doing? I travel this route quite frequently. This is Southwest Boulevard, and we've just crossed over into Kansas from Missouri. And this is, or was at one time, the Jefferson Highway. There are two branches that start in Kansas City. Actually, the whole highway goes from Winnipeg to New Orleans. But in Missouri, it's sort of unique in that it splits. There's an east branch and a west branch in the north side of Kansas City, north of Kansas City, that comes together in Clay County and then heads into Kansas City. And then about Grand and, what is it, Admiral? It splits again, and there's an east branch that goes through Missouri and a west branch that goes through Kansas. We are on the west branch going into Kansas. It's Southwest Boulevard. And, you know, at one time during the Jefferson Highway, where I'm at right now would be open or a rural area. Now it's grown up and been urbanized. We're in the city of Kansas City, Kansas. There's two Kansas cities, one on the Missouri side and one on the Kansas side. The one on the Kansas side has less population. And this is a town known as Rosedale, or once was a town called Rosedale. There's a Rosedale Memorial Arch, which is a site, and you can't see it on the video, but it's an arch dedicated to, I believe, the Rainbow Division, American forces in World War I, called the Rainbow Division because it was a mix of different services. It was experimental division. Up until that time, I believe that you didn't mix different branches. You'd have an artillery division, an infantry division, and I believe this one was a mix of like artillery, infantry, whatever. Try and make a division more of a self-sufficient unit. And this is Rosedale, northeast side of Rosedale. The highway veers to the right up here underneath the overpass. This is where Southwest Boulevard connects with I-35 on the southwest side. And if you head south from here, you're on Mission Road, which is an old road in itself. But to go south, you actually have to go north. You have to turn right, and then immediately make a turn on the ramp here to get onto Mission. And now we're coming into the downtown area. Once was the downtown area of Rosedale. It's still a pretty distinctive, Victorian functional buildings, old storefronts. That lets you know that before the city incorporated it, it was once its own little town. This is I-35 above us. And this is downtown Rosedale. Vox Theater holds some events. It's a nice little theater. And I guess we weren't in the right place for it at one time, but I love this building up here on the corner. My wife and I considered buying it. I really wanted it. It was in the right price range for us. Has fully self-sufficient apartments upstairs and a storefront downstairs. But it needed a lot of work. I guess there was that. And so you have to sort of forgive me because I'm not exactly sure. I know this part was once the Jefferson Highway, and there's another road name attached to it too, but I fail to recall what that is right now. Here's another landmark, Boulevard Drive-In Theater. It's been in the same family for a long time, and they do a lot of swap meets and hold old-timey movie theaters. If you need trailer parts for your RV and stuff, KC Home Trailer is a place I like to go. They often offer a lot of stuff at a discount than what you could find at some of the bigger camping RV stores. A guy that I follow, Nomadic Fanatic, right now is having woes with his RV refrigerator, and the prices on RV stuff is kind of set to like tell people that if you're in this kind of thing, you must be rich, and thus we're going to stick it to you. Because who else in their right mind would want to pay almost $3,000 for an RV refrigerator? It's ridiculous, and then have to wait 6 months to have it installed. And yeah, I've had work done on our camper van, and it was really expensive. It's kind of to let people know, I think, that you need to be in a higher class to afford something. It's what it seems like. Now, this is where I get confused. I'm going to take this into Merriam, because I think, these old roads were kind of like meandering rivers. They would change courses, they would change channels, they would, as one road got more modernized, they would switch to that one. I believe that there's 2 branches to the highway, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. On the Kansas side, there was an older branch which was picked merely because it was finished first. It had more improved roads, meaning when it came into these different small towns, it was bricked over. But the course that they originally wanted for the road was down Metcalf, a much more straight route, and a much more there's going to be a more urban route. I don't know what the thinking really was, but when they built the highway, the Metcalf route was really not very well finished. So their idea was to take the older established route and then change it over to the Metcalf route. And why I'm saying it confuses me, and I haven't fully mapped out the Kansas side yet. I've attempted it, but parts of it kind of started to follow the old Santa Fe Trail, and there's this road here was the highway for a long time until it was replaced by I-35. It was US 69, I think. Man, I'm really foggy, aren't I? And it was before that, it was an old military road that became a highway long before there were even named routes like the Jefferson Highway or any of these associations. And what it was before it was part of the Jefferson Highway, it was called the Old Kansas City Road. In other words, there was this road that kind of went out of Kansas City, the center of town, southwest, and then turned south, and it connected a lot of the towns to Kansas City. And it was a military road before that. And the interesting thing about that was it connected some of the old forts along the Missouri-Kansas state line. But when it was that road at first, it was basically a military road to a supply route for the military to supply these old forts, because Kansas at the time was Indian territory. It was territory set aside for the Native Americans, like a reservation. And settlers were not allowed to come across the state line into Kansas because it was Indian territory. And so they needed to have these forts along the line to kind of keep settlers east and Indians west, I guess, at the time, and to keep things peaceful, allow the trade and everything. And I believe this is what the area where it would have headed south on Metcalf, the newer route, and this is the older route here, which continues southwest Now it's called Merriam Drive. And after Merriam, which is where I'm going to end this part of it, it kind of becomes mucky. I think it roughly follows along I-35, and there's a lot of places where it is underneath I-35. You know, maybe a stretch of outer road here. You know, so it's not a really good way of following it. Take forever to find all these dead end streets that have been orphaned when they built the highways. But you know, about the military road, there's forts like Fort Scott and you know, places like that, places we've heard of before, in one way or the other. And that lasted until what, the 18? It was early on. It was like early part of the 19th century, maybe 1830s, 1840s, and then they just kind of, well, we don't need these forts anymore, and sort of abandoned them. This light is a little confusing. This intersection here is kind of strange. They abandoned the forts and thus didn't have as much a need for the old military road until about the 1850s, when violence started happening along the border between Missouri and Kansas, between the Missouri pro-slave forces and the Northeast abolitionists from Massachusetts, who were settling into this area to try and bring Kansas into the Union as a free state. And what had happened was, up until that time, Congress had drawn a line north and south, and with the exception of Missouri, any state coming into the Union south of this line would be slave, and any state north of the line would be free. And the South was kind of going, well, we're losing out on that, on population and everything, so they wanted to erase that plan, and eventually they did. And so what came to be was states or new territories wanting to be states could decide whether they be free or slave. And the first territory on the roster was the state of Kansas. And when that happened, people were so divided and so adamant that their cause was right that it erupted into violence. It was the pre-Civil War, Civil War. In other words, Civil War broke out right here in the 1850s, years before the actual Civil War between the North and the South. And, people you may have heard of, kind of a symbol of the state of Kansas, is John Brown, an abolitionist who came into Kansas, a very radical abolitionist and very violent, and there were pro-slave people who were just as violent, and it wasn't pretty. Lawrence, Kansas, which was the free state capital, where all the New England people came to settle, was sacked by pro-slavery forces, and then during the Civil War it was sacked again more seriously by William Quantrill and his pro-Confederate guerrilla forces. Although, it's said that the Jayhawkers, which was the pro-Kansas Free State side, were pretty radical and just as violent as anything the abolitionists came out with. Here's downtown Merriam, and Merriam's an old town on, one time it was on the Jefferson Highway. When Kansas City started, most of the urban population was east of the Missouri state line, and then there were a few small farming towns like Merriam and Shawnee and Olathe. They were really small, and some were connected by what would amount to a streetcar. I believe it was called the Strang Line. And the population in Johnson County, which is where we are, Johnson County, Kansas, didn't start to jump until the 1950s, post-World War II, when suburban housing started coming in, and that was made possible by the federal government spending money on highways and making it more possible for people to spread out farther driving their own cars. And like I said before that, to get around, you had these old country roads that were pretty bad, or you had the more reliable way of getting around, which was usually would be like a streetcar. They would call them interurban cars, and usually it would be a single car that would haul passengers. A lot of them, some of them were electric and some of them were gas powered. And another name for those cars would be doodlebugs. A lot of people call them doodlebugs. And I believe there was a station out here called Strangline Station, but I think the whole thing was called the Strangline, and which is named after somebody. Whoops. This guy's really determined to get out and turn. But yeah, this is where we're going to end our foray on the Jefferson Highway. It kind of comes up to Shawnee Drive up here, Shawnee Mission Parkway, I mean, and then it really kind of dead ends. It's sort of hard to follow south of that. But anyway, I'm going to head over to one of my favorite stores, and this should be enough boorishness on history that I don't seem to completely know or understand myself. Like I say, if anybody has any comments, questions, or additions to what I said, feel free to write that down in the comment area below, and you know, and then there's always email, Facebook, and I think that's it, because I'm not that completely technologically savvy when it comes to social media. Oh, and Twitter, I guess. I'll try and put those links in. Anyway, hee hee.